This story is titled, Stepmom Demanded I Give Her My Late Mother's Jewelry for Her Daughter's Sweet 16. 2 weeks later, I saw it all being sold at her yard sale. I never thought I'd be standing in front of a random yard sale, staring at my dead mother's jewelry being sold off like worthless trinkets. My hands were shaking as I took pictures with my phone, documenting every single piece I recognized from my childhood. The pearl necklace she wore at her wedding. The sapphire earrings my dad gave her for their 10th anniversary. The delicate gold bracelet with my birthstone that I was supposed to receive on my 21st birthday. Each item held a story, a memory, a piece of my heart, and there they were, laid out on a folding table with price tags that wouldn't even cover a decent dinner. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when my life wasn't this complicated mess of betrayal and family drama. I'm Ashley, 24F, and this story is about how my stepmother Linda, 45F, and her daughter Megan, 16F, managed to destroy what little faith I had left in family bonds. My mother passed away when I was 15, after a brutal battle with cancer that seemed to drain every ounce of life from our home. My father, James, 47M, was devastated. For 2 years, he barely functioned, and I'd basically raised myself through high school. The jewelry box was all I had left of my mom, a beautiful mahogany case filled with pieces that marked every important moment in her life. Dad had given it to me the day after the funeral, saying Mom would have wanted me to have it when I was ready. Things started to change when Linda entered our lives. She was the new office manager at my dad's dental practice, and within 6 months, they were dating. I was happy for him, truly. The light had returned to his eyes, and he started smiling again. Even her daughter Megan seemed nice enough at first, though she was clearly used to being the center of attention. What I didn't realize then was how calculating Linda could be. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The way she'd casually mention how certain pieces of furniture would look better elsewhere, how family photos started disappearing from the walls, how she'd reorganize rooms without asking. But I was so desperate for our family to work that I ignored every red flag. The jewelry box sat safely in my room all this time, untouched. Mom's most precious pieces were wrapped in soft cloth, each with a little note explaining its significance. I'd sometimes take them out late at night, reading her handwriting over and over, trying to hear her voice in my head. Those quiet moments were all I had left of her. Then came Megan's upcoming Sweet 16 party. Linda had been planning it for months, turning it into this enormous production that seemed more about impressing her friends than celebrating her daughter. I still remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was studying for my nursing finals in my childhood bedroom, having come home for the weekend to do laundry and spend time with Dad. Little did I know that this ordinary Sunday would set off a chain of events that would make me question everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and the true nature of the people closest to me. If only I'd locked my door that day. If only I'd taken the jewelry box with me to my apartment. If only I'd seen what was coming. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20ths. And what happened next would change everything. That Sunday afternoon, Linda knocked on my door. Her usual plastic smile was replaced with what she probably thought was a warm, maternal expression. I should have known something was wrong. She never came to my room unless she wanted something. She started talking about Megan's Sweet 16 party, how it was such a special milestone for a young woman, and how important it was to make her feel like part of our family. My stomach dropped when her eyes landed on my mother's jewelry box. The way she looked at it, it was like a predator sizing up its prey. That's when she dropped the bomb. Wouldn't it be wonderful, she suggested, if Megan could wear some of my mother's jewelry for her party? After all, she was technically my sister now, and this would be such a meaningful way to welcome her into the family. She didn't want to borrow all of it, she assured me. Just the pearl necklace, the sapphire earrings, and maybe that cute little gold bracelet. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Those were the exact pieces that meant the most to me, the ones with the most significant memories attached. Was it a coincidence? I didn't think so. I'd caught Megan going through my room before, though Linda had always dismissed it as teenage curiosity. When I hesitated, Linda's facade cracked slightly. She started talking about how I was being selfish, how I needed to let go of the past, how I was making Megan feel like an outsider. Then came the guilt trip about my father, how much he wanted us to be a real family, how disappointed he would be if he knew I was refusing to share with my stepsister. I tried to explain the significance of each piece, showing her my mother's handwritten notes. But Linda waved them off, saying I was being melodramatic and stuck in the past. The more I resisted, the more aggressive she became. Finally, she pulled out her trump card. My father had already told Megan she could wear them. My heart stopped. Had he really? Dad knew what these pieces meant to me. He was the one who gave me the jewelry box, who understood its importance. But lately, he'd been so wrapped up in his new life with Linda that sometimes I wondered if he remembered our old one at all. I felt cornered. If Dad had really agreed to this, refusing would cause a huge family rift right before the party. Linda stood there, arms crossed, waiting for my answer. In that moment, I made a decision I would later regret. I agreed to loan them the 3 pieces, but only under certain conditions. I insisted on getting them back the day after the party. I made Linda promise they wouldn't leave the house, and that Megan would treat them with absolute care. I even wrote down which pieces I was lending them and took photos of each one. Linda rolled her eyes at what she called my excessive precautions, but agreed to everything. What I didn't know then was that my father had never actually agreed to any of this. It was the first of many lies that would unravel in the coming weeks. As Linda left my room with the jewelry, I had this overwhelming sense of dread, like I'd just made a terrible mistake. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, haunted by the thought of Megan wearing my mother's jewelry. But what happened next would make this moment seem almost trivial in comparison. If I had known what Linda was really planning, I would have grabbed that jewelry box and run far away that very night. The Sweet 16 party was exactly the over-the-top spectacle I expected. Linda had rented out an expensive venue, hired a professional photographer, and even arranged for some local social media influencer to make an appearance. But what caught my attention wasn't the elaborate decorations or the expensive catering. It was what Megan wasn't wearing. None of my mother's jewelry was anywhere to be seen. Not the pearl necklace, not the sapphire earrings, not the gold bracelet. Instead, Megan was wearing what looked like brand new designer jewelry that perfectly matched her dress. My stomach churned as I remembered how insistent Linda had been about borrowing those specific pieces. When I pulled Linda aside to ask about the jewelry, she brushed me off with a wave of her hand, saying they decided the pieces were too old-fashioned for the party's theme. She assured me everything was safely back in their bedroom and that I could collect them tomorrow. Something about the way she avoided eye contact made my skin crawl. That's when I ran into my dad's sister, Aunt Rachel, 50F, who'd flown in from Colorado for the party. She'd always been close to my mom and had helped me through the worst days after her death. The moment she saw me, I knew something was wrong. She pulled me into a quiet corner and asked if I'd seen the Facebook Marketplace listing. My heart stopped. What Facebook Marketplace listing? With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and showed me a post from 3 days ago. There they were, my mother's jewelry pieces, along with several other items I recognized from our house, all listed for sale by Linda's best friend Karen, 44F. The post claimed they were vintage estate pieces that had been in the family for generations. I felt like I was going to be sick. The party continued around me. Music blasting, people laughing, Megan opening expensive presents, but I felt like I was underwater. Aunt Rachel kept talking, explaining how she'd recognized the jewelry immediately because she'd been with my dad when he bought the sapphire earrings for my mom. Then she dropped another bombshell. She'd actually messaged the seller, pretending to be interested in buying. Karen had responded saying the pieces would be available at her yard sale this weekend, along with lots of other great vintage items. The yard sale was scheduled for tomorrow morning. My mind was racing. Why would Linda give the jewelry to Karen to sell? Why go through such an elaborate scheme just to get rid of it? And most importantly, what else had they taken? I made an excuse about feeling sick and left the party early, driving straight to my apartment. As I lay in bed that night, pieces started falling into place. The missing family photos, the reorganized rooms, the way Linda had been pushing me to move more of my things to my apartment, saying I needed to make space for Megan's growing collection of clothes and accessories. How long had they been planning this? How many other things had disappeared without me noticing? And most crucially, what was I going to do about it? I set my alarm for 6 a.m. The yard sale started at 8, and I had no intention of letting them sell off the last pieces I had of my mother. But as I would soon discover, showing up at that yard sale would reveal far more than just my mother's missing jewelry. I arrived at Karen's house at 7:30 a.m., parking my car down the street where I could watch the setup. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night looking through old photos of my mom wearing those precious pieces of jewelry, each image making me more determined to get them back. What I saw next made my blood run cold. Linda's car pulled into Karen's driveway, and she started unloading boxes. Not just any boxes. I recognized them from our attic. The same boxes where we'd stored my mom's things after she passed. Boxes I hadn't been allowed to access for months because Linda had reorganized the attic for safety reasons. I watched in horror as they began setting up tables. There was my mom's vintage vanity mirror that Dad had restored for her. The hand-painted ceramic vase she'd made in her pottery class. Even her old record collection that she used to play on Sunday mornings while making pancakes. Everything I thought was safely stored away was being priced and arranged like common garage sale items. But what broke me wasn't seeing all these pieces of my childhood laid out for strangers to paw through. It was watching Linda and Karen laughing together as they set up, like this was just another fun weekend activity. Like they weren't destroying the last physical connections I had to my mother. At 7:45, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of my car and walked straight toward them, phone in hand, already pulling up the photos I'd taken of the jewelry before lending it. Linda's face when she saw me, I'll never forget it. For just a second, her mask slipped, and I saw pure panic before she composed herself. Karen quickly stepped between us, claiming she had no idea these items held any sentimental value. Linda had told her everything was just old junk that the family wanted to get rid of. She even had the audacity to suggest that selling these items would be what your mother would have wanted. Apparently, Linda had told her my mom had always planned to sell these things to fund Megan's college education. That's when I noticed something that made everything so much worse. Mixed in with my mother's jewelry were other familiar pieces, things that had belonged to my dad's mother, my grandmother, who had passed away just last year. Family heirlooms that were supposed to be passed down through generations were being sold off for pocket change. I started taking pictures of everything, documenting each item. Linda tried to stop me, claiming I was harassing her and threatening to call the police. But I noticed she didn't actually reach for her phone. She knew she couldn't risk official involvement. Then I saw something that made my heart stop. A small box partially hidden under the table, labeled Jay's office. My father's office. The same office where he kept important family documents, photos, and memories. What else had they taken? What else were they planning to sell? I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I needed to be smart about this. Dad was still in the dark about everything, probably sleeping off last night's party. One wrong move and Linda would spin this whole situation to make me look like the unstable one, just like she'd done before. But what happened next would change everything. Because at that exact moment, an unexpected ally arrived at the yard sale, someone who would help me expose Linda's true nature once and for all. A familiar silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. My heart leaped into my throat as I watched my grandmother's best friend, Martha, 72F, step out of the car. She'd been like a second grandmother to me growing up, and more importantly, she'd been the executor of my grandmother's estate after she passed away last year. The look on Linda's face was priceless. She clearly hadn't expected anyone from the family's inner circle to show up this early, or at all. Martha took one look at the jewelry display, and her usual gentle demeanor vanished. She'd helped my grandmother catalog every piece of family jewelry before she died, creating detailed records with photos and documentation of their history and value. Martha slowly walked around the tables, her face growing darker with each item she recognized. Then she pulled out her phone and started making calls. The first was to my Aunt Rachel, who was already on her way. The second was to my father. Linda tried to intervene, frantically whispering something to Karen, who started quickly packing up some of the items. But Martha stood her ground, taking photos and making a detailed list of everything she saw. When Linda attempted to stop her, Martha calmly reminded her that selling items from my grandmother's estate without the executor's knowledge or permission could have serious legal implications. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan, of all people. My hands shook as I read it. Apparently, she and Linda had gotten into a huge fight after the party last night. Megan had discovered what her mother was planning to do with my mom's jewelry and didn't want any part of it. She'd been trying to work up the courage to tell me, but Linda had threatened to cancel her car privileges if she said anything. The text included screenshots of conversations between Linda and Karen, discussing how they'd been selling off items from our house for months, splitting the profits. They had been targeting specific pieces that they thought wouldn't be missed, slowly emptying our home of its most precious memories. As I stood there processing this betrayal, I heard the unmistakable sound of my father's car engine. Linda's face went pale. She knew her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. But what happened next showed me a side of my father I hadn't seen since my mother died. A side that reminded me he was still the same man who had once fought so hard to give us a good life. The next few minutes would change our family forever, as years of lies and manipulation finally came to light in Karen's driveway, surrounded by the scattered pieces of our family's history. My father's reaction as he took in the scene was something I'll never forget. He stood there silently, his eyes moving from table to table, recognition dawning on his face with each item he saw. The color drained from his face when he spotted Mom's jewelry box, now empty and priced at $15. Linda immediately launched into damage control, crying about how she was just trying to help clear out old things to make room for our new family memories. But Dad wasn't looking at her. He was reading the text messages I'd shown him, his hands trembling as he scrolled through proof of months of systematic theft and deception. What broke him wasn't the jewelry or even the lies, it was finding Mom's old record collection. The Elvis album they danced to at their wedding was marked $2. That's when he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, asking Linda how long she'd been selling off our memories. Aunt Rachel arrived just in time to hear Linda's desperate attempts to blame everything on Karen, claiming she had no idea these items were important. But Karen, seeing she was about to be thrown under the bus, suddenly found her conscience. She revealed how Linda had been planning this for months, how she'd specifically targeted items with sentimental value, knowing they'd be worth more to collectors. Then Megan arrived. She'd taken an Uber to be there, defying her mother's orders to stay home. Standing in front of everyone, she revealed how Linda had been using her Sweet 16 party as a smokescreen, knowing everyone would be too distracted to notice what was happening with the jewelry. She'd overheard Linda on the phone with potential buyers weeks ago, promising them authentic vintage pieces with a real family history. Dad made 2 calls that morning. The first was to a locksmith to change our house locks. The second was to his lawyer. Within hours, Linda was packing her bags, alternating between tears and threats, while Megan chose to stay with her aunt until things settled down. We spent the rest of the day recovering what we could. Martha's detailed records helped us identify and reclaim most of my grandmother's pieces. Through Karen's sales records, we managed to track down some of Mom's jewelry that had already been sold, though not all of it. The gold bracelet with my birthstone was gone forever, sold to a Cash for Gold place weeks ago. In the aftermath, our family grew closer through the shared pain. Dad and I finally had long conversations about Mom, sharing memories we'd both been afraid to discuss while Linda was around. Megan, free from her mother's influence, turned out to be a much different person than I'd thought. She even helped me create a digital archive of all our family photos and mementos, ensuring our memories would never be lost again. 3 months later, Dad handed me a small box. Inside was a new gold bracelet, not identical to Mom's but beautiful in its own way. He'd had it engraved with Mom's favorite saying, "Love leaves a memory no one can steal." We both cried as he put it on my wrist. Sometimes the deepest betrayals lead to the strongest bonds. Linda's attempt to erase our past only made us more determined to preserve it. Now, Mom's jewelry box sits in my apartment, not as full as it once was, but each remaining piece tells a story of love, loss, and the unbreakable connections that hold a real family together. As for Linda, I heard she tried the same scheme in her next relationship. But that's another story, and this time, I made sure to warn the family before history could repeat itself.